everyone. I'm Bernadette Melnick, Ohio State's Chief Wellness Officer and Dean of the College of Nursing. I'm delighted to introduce to you two nationally renowned experts, Dr. Tim Porter O'Grady, who is an expert in innovation leadership, and Dr. Jerry Mansfield, Chief Nursing Officer for Ohio State's University Hospital and Ross Hart Hospital. They will be giving you nuggets of wisdom today on how best to lead others.
If there's been one constant in this world of healthcare, innovation, and change, it's just that innovation is all around us. And you cannot turn on a TV or attend a conference or open a newspaper without hearing about and reading about and feeling this concept of innovation that's just surrounding us. So with that in mind, we want to spend some time today focusing on how do we lead other people in an environment that's just ripe with innovation and change. And we'd like to talk about some strategies and tactics that could be extremely helpful to you as you embrace change, as you focus on innovation, and as you try to apply it in your workplace. So, Tim, with everything we're seeing in our healthcare industry, what kind of thoughts and ideas do you have about change and leading others through change that can be helpful both personally and professionally to those who are watching this?
Well, Scott, you're right. There's nothing more onerous than change, and we're in the midst of major change. We're actually in the midst of major social change, and there's several levels of change that we're confronting now, socio-political and economic and technological change, and all of it is having an impact on the work that we do, and the work itself is changing. So you need now to recognize as we move into this kind of socio-technical or digital age that we need now to be innovators at a very high level. And so innovation is now a way of characterizing change that describes the need to describe and to do and to be different. One of the things that's different about an improvement in innovation is that improvement improves on something that exists. Innovation creates something that doesn't. So you have to be available to that. Open your mind and your capacity to engage and to be available to the opportunities that are emerging, and recognize that what we need to design for what we're becoming is so different from what we were that what we've done isn't going to be adequate to get us where we're going. Which means that now, different from past change, which was iterative, now we have to be substantially different. And we have to be able to have different ideas and different approaches to change and see what we do differently.
Okay, thanks. Jerry, do you have some thoughts on that?
I think Tim raises the best point about the difference between improvement and innovation. Improvement is one that we ask our staff to do every day. Look at the process you're currently involved in and what value is it bringing to the person you're serving. And while that works in many small settings or in small tests of change, what we're really asking people to do now is where are we headed, what do we need to do differently, and create an environment where those ideas can percolate and be translated into really making something unique that folks don't even know yet might exist. So one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that folks know that we're asking them not to just make incremental change. It's really to think much larger than they have before and do it in a very interprofessional manner.
Okay.
I think what's really, really important about what Jerry says is when you're making a change of this latitude, of this significance, people need to be able to stay connected to their meaning. And so the question why is an important question to be able to engage. And one of the things I hear from what Jerry was sharing is that people need to know what's the reason for it. What is the meaning behind this change? You can do almost any what if you can answer almost any why. And so people have a right to know that why as a part of making that change. And I think a part of leadership is giving them that foundation so that they can attach the meaning of their work to the change that they're trying to undertake.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question, actually, about how do we make change less scary? I mean, we've all been through it. We all know leading others through change is a scary notion, not just for ourselves, but for those who we're leading. Whether it's a lack of understanding, a lack of information, or whatever it is, it scares people. So how do we engage people more so that they aren't as afraid of these changes that comes with a new and innovative way of approaching healthcare?
Well, my particular belief is, and I think it's a pretty science-based belief. Stephen Hawking wrote in one of his books, A Brief History of Time, he said, if you really want to understand change, there's only really two words you have to really recall. Change is. It just simply is. And so a part of the role of the leader is to make change normative. Change is the work we do. Change, patients come to us in order for something to happen, in order for something to change. So that's really our work. If we could make it normative and recognize that it's a fundamental part of our work and draw the fear out of it and make it a part of who we are, I think we can probably approach some of the more substantial changes a little bit more rationally and reasonably and help remove some of that fear. I think that's one of the first steps that we could do.
I agree. And in addition, so recognizing as a leader that change is concerning, just allowing that to happen, I think, is an important first step. Don't be surprised that as you introduce the idea of something needs to be different, we need you to think differently. Don't be shocked when people react in a negative way or uncertain way because they fear perhaps the unknown. So one of the things I think is really important is reminding everybody of the mission and vision for what you're trying to produce. If you can reconnect them to the work of the organization and what they do actually contributes to the mission vision, the goals of the organization, I think that provides a bit of a foundation that it's not all changing. It's just sort of refocusing and recreating something new that the innovation can really take a seat in helping the organization do something it's not thought it could.
Okay.
And another thing I think that I'd add to that is if you can break the change down into smaller units, small, tiny changes, sometimes build small successes, and then as you build on small successes, then you can attack the hairy, audacious changes with a little bit more confidence and a little bit more sense of accomplishment when you've been able to meet some of the requirements of the smaller changes.
Okay. I'd like to add one more thing. Yeah. So when you do that, then you build on what did you learn by that experiment? And what can you then say, well, then this maybe didn't work the way we thought, but what could we do differently and change it a little bit so that the momentum becomes slow but not necessarily stagnant, need to move things forward, but building on what we've learned to do it better the next time?
Well, that question brings to mind a question in my mind, because you're saying, asking the question, it's a powerful question, asking what can we learn from this, whether it was a success or a failure, if you want to call it that. And so I'm assuming people out there would love to hear some actual, quote, real-world examples of how a change process worked, from an actual organization that you've been involved in or helped with. And what does it look like, feel like? How did you actually do it? What happened?
I think one of the important stories, at least most recently in my career, has been one of the leader necessarily focusing on how am I going to stitch these things I'm hearing into a more comprehensive whole to then lead that change forward. For us in our organization, we are really examining the national problem of alarm fatigue. So there's all this technology, as Tim talked before, all these things that are supposed to help us do our jobs in keeping our patients safe. But technology has a downside in that now we have all these alarms about telemetry and oximetry and pumps and vents. And these noises can distract to the point of Joint Commission now identifying that is a source of harm in our national healthcare system. So in our organization, realizing that we have that same issue and we want to do something better to help the staff discern what alarms are really critical and what are those that are just nuisance? Can we remove them? And pulling together an interprofessional team to sort of lead this effort forward, we put a group together that was co-led by a nurse and a pretty key physician in the organization with some executive sponsorship from the overall organization. And by working over a little bit of time and reviewing the evidence, recast the policies and procedures around cardiac monitoring in the organization, spending a lot of time educating constituents where they would raise a lot of reasons why it would fail, and just addressing those concerns as we went along, putting them in place, and then following up with, this is what we're learning as we go through it. I think that is an example of change can happen, but you must do it in a way that engages the people that live with it every day so that they feel confident that it's moving in the right direction.
Okay.
I think that notion of engagement is really critical. And there's three things that come to my mind when I think about that engagement. Are we advancing the interests of the organization in the world that's changing around it? So an example would be, I've been doing some work with Kaiser Permanente, and they have a unique model that is very similar to what is being called for in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. And so they're really looking at the triple aim and trying to have that cascade down to the point of service where it really counts, where nurses and providers meet. And so a part of their effort is, our mission is to be able to be transparently competitive in a way that serves the population which is ours. And we need to be able to do that in relationship to service excellence. We need to be able to do that in relationship to quality metrics and in relationship to affordability. So how can we make it a part of the agenda of every practitioner to see that that is their work and that that's where that work unfolds? And how can we make sure that, number two, the resources of the organization are dedicated to focusing on developing those insights and capacities and skills at the point of service? And then the third thing is translated in the language of those who provide that care. Leaders should be doing translational work at that point of service so that it relates to what Jerry's talking about. What does it mean to me every day? How am I going to have to change my practice when we're serving populations instead of just simply episodes or events or patients? Let them know that it's going to change the very function and activity of their care in a meaningful way so that they can begin to start saying, oh, it means me, and this is what it means to me, so that it's personal as well as organizational.
Okay.
I think that's why this is the most exciting time for nursing in my entire career right in front of us, is that we've always been prepared to look at the full continuum of care. We've looked at patients pre-admission, post-discharge, pre-procedure, post-procedure, in community settings and a variety of healthcare delivery models. And nursing understands that it's the person's response, it's the patient and family, what they're doing with what they've just encountered. That's what's just as important as the procedure or the thing that's happened to them. And I think this is our time to really draw that as nurse leaders and to say, how can we manage this better so that the patient has a better experience throughout the continuum of care, so that it's not just the episode in which they're in front of me, it's how are they incorporating these lifestyle changes that is really the ultimate goal of population health. Keep people healthy. Don't treat them just when they get sick.
There's been a lot written about this notion of, and you've spoken about it, engagement and transparency and even empowerment, which has been around forever, it seems, that word. So what does that really mean in this age of changing healthcare and innovation? What does it mean to engage our people, as we talk about leading others, to be transparent and to empower them to do things great?
Well, when we have heard the word empowerment a lot. The issue for me has been whether what we've heard is an accurate representation of what empowerment is. Empowerment does suggest that there's a level of ownership in the people that you empower. You can't really empower anybody. Empowerment is actually recognizing the power an individual or a group has and allowing that power to be fully expressed. Well, that means being clear about who's accountable for what, who owns what kinds of decisions, how those decisions are made, how those decisions are supported and resourced, and whether those who make those decisions and take those actions have the skills necessary to be able to do that well. So the leader has to have that level of awareness, number one, and then with regard to accountability, has to recognize that there's ownership and accountability. I can't make you accountable. It's something that generates from within. And so we've got to recognize that accountability and then help those with the skills and the talents and the capacities and the resources necessary to express that accountability. And this is increasingly important when we think about all of the clinical efforts related to health reform and all of the changes that are going to have to occur in practice, from moving from a bed-based kind of focus on practice to a population-based or an episodic-based or a continuum-based focus. Imagine how care has to change. Imagine now as a nurse you've been assigned all of your career to a bed, and now the model of care changes. We engage the patient earlier with the goal of not getting them to the bed. See if we can avoid the bed. and now remixing what you do in terms of your care. What is that? What does that look like? What does that accountability play out? And what is your role in relationship to other players there? That's how empowerment plays out. That's the ownership part of empowerment.
Two things come to mind based on what Tim's saying. The one is, do I have the capacity to act? I think each employee, the role of the leader is to help make sure that folks know this is what I'm able to do in this context, and then what are the expectations of me doing that? And I think we could be a lot clearer with people about, we would like you to do whatever you can, but in the moment, do the most effective thing you can. And if it bumps up against a policy or a rule or a regulation, there's an opportunity to note that, take care of the situation, but bring that forward, because there could be a possibility of change. Tim said something in the presentation about stop doing things. I think we have got to get a lot better at that. We tend to see new change, new things to do as something to layer on top of what we're already doing. And that is not really fruitful for anybody else's time, because if we keep doing things the way we've always done them, we get what we have always produced. And this sense of transparency for us now is that the public is very aware of what's going on in healthcare systems. Those are things that we used to know and sort of hold dear to our hearts, but our patient experience scores, our quality metrics, while the public is still a little bit naive on what that really means, as time goes on, they are very aware. And now I have neighbors asking me about our organization and how we compare to our local competition. That was unheard of. It used to be that if it was good enough to get admitted, who questioned anything? Those days are changing, and if we're not aware and recognize the importance of achieving the metrics that the public will appreciate, certain health systems could be in trouble. So the block and tackle of core measures and patient experience scores and readmission rates and length of stay, those things, those words that we talk about all the times in our meetings every day, the public that surrounds us and that we serve know those things, and will start to make decisions about where they go based on what they know.
Yeah, those are the vehicles now for their choice making. I mean, think of what happened recently when CMS revealed what they paid physicians out of the program, and the national reaction that came from that at varying levels depending on where you were on that scale. What kind of a feedback is going to be created when that becomes a norm, and we're actually making critical decisions on where we go, who we see, who insures us, what's the health plan we work with, based on the transparency around, did I get good service? Mm-hmm. I mean, where I was, wherever I am located, and are there metrics to tell me that I got good service when compared and contrasted with other places? Are the quality metrics that we're all using, are they the same? Are they better? And is the price that I'm paying justified by the first two? All of that's going to be really critical. And Jerry said something else around the notion of clarity. One of the things that the leader can do with regard to clarity is make sure that everybody is clear on what it is they've decided and what it is they're doing. I think one of the techniques that's really good with a leader is when we've discussed something or we've made a decision or we've moved something, saying to that person, tell me what your understanding is of what we just decided. Because how many times have you been in a meeting, made a decision, you all go out to implement that decision, and then find out that whatever anybody understood of that decision is different from what somebody else understood, and we're back at the table again, rethinking the decision. Well, if the leader just simply went around the table at the end and said, Scott, what is your understanding of what we just decided? Jerry, what is your understanding of what we just decided? Tim, what is your understanding of what we just decided? We'd get some congruence so that when we left the table, we were actually implementing the same thing.
There's another simple technique that we are using a lot lately, and frequently asked questions. When people want to know the why, when you start to list all the reasons why change needs to occur or something's being implemented, when you start to introduce those concepts, when people start to tell you and ask the questions, they're likely not the only person with the question. So anything you can do to draw clarity around the message and allow a variety of managers to use the same document and the same discussion points helps draw a little more consistency of the message as we go forward. I think you can eliminate a lot of angst and help things move forward if you just are really clear. Very short responses to some very key questions can make a big difference between whether the people are focused and clear about where we're headed, or they're confused and they make up their own reality.
Right.
Yeah. Another technique that's really, really important at the table around clarity is how carefully you set the table. You know, we often are not as cautious and careful as leaders when we're setting the table for the work we're going to do. Are we matching the work with the people at the table? I recently had that experience myself. I was so enthused about something, and I got other enthusiastic people and found that I had a table full of idea people and no reflectors. And so I was ideas all over the place, but no focus, no movement, no generativity, because everybody was at the idea level. And I needed some people who were reflectors, who instead of thinking broadly, thought deeply. And I thought, well, you know, I really didn't think really carefully about how I set this table for the work that we were doing. And now we're not getting anywhere because I failed to do that as I should.
I'm going to add to that. Recently in a meeting where we were talking about a change, and the enthusiastic idea people are just going to town about what they want to see change and do. And as I noticed the reaction in the room, there was a couple staff people who did not have the same verbal expression or participation. So I asked them in the meeting, I said, I'm wondering what you're thinking. I don't see you engaging in the same direction we're going. Are we doing the right thing? And these were staff who typically did not openly share things, but I knew they were informal leaders back in their units and departments. And eventually one of them admitted, she says, I really don't think this is going to succeed the way it's outlined. She says, I get what we're trying to do. I understand the outcomes we're trying to achieve, but how it's going to come across, it may not be the way you intended. And we all sort of paused and said, well, what would you do differently? She outlined a 3-step plan. It seemed very reasonable, put it in place, but what changed in that environment was she became, as an important cheerleader to the change process with her frontline team, it wasn't something then that was coming from leadership. It had been embraced by her for the right reasons, but the implementation was going to be much more palatable to the people that do it every day. That was a wake-up call for me. We have got to make sure we have the right folks around the room to make sure we do the right thing.
Yeah.
There's a concept that's emerging in complexity leadership. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's called predictive and adaptive capacity. And Jerry was really describing it well, because if you know that, if you discover that in a person, you can now pretty well predict that that's the kind of skill or talent that person is going to have that's going to be needed in other settings. So how do we make sure that when we're planning or we're putting together groups or we're undertaking action, that we think about that experience again and say, this is the result of that. This is what happened. I can pretty much predict that using those skills will get us here. So that when I'm setting the table or planning work or setting an agenda for what it is we need to do, I know what mix of people to have because I have an experience with those who've had that mix before. And that, again, comes from transparency. Know your people. Know what they have. Know what they don't have. Know what you need to draw from them when you need to. Everybody has gifts. They don't all have the same gifts at the same time. And be able to pull that, predict that, pull that, and then use it in a way that's meaningful and successful.
One of the other things I found really helpful is a person should be very deliberate. I love that metaphor about setting the table. So if I have a task in front of me or a problem that involves groups, I think, is this a task force? Is it a work group? Is it a committee? Is it a council? And we don't have to decide today what those words really mean. The point is that really defining a group's task around a particular problem can go a long way to making sure that people are engaging in the solution because they see this as not something that's just going to last forever. It has a begin point, an end point. We're trying to achieve a particular outcome. And then where that goes after that could be a very informed decision. It may ultimately end up in a formal committee go forward. But I think we could break some things up, to Tim's point, into smaller chunks and allow an interprofessional team to massage it and then decide, what is our intended outcome for the next step. So a leader should be very deliberate about these decisions about who's coming to the meeting, what their role is in that meeting, what do you intend to achieve before they get there, And also recognize that there must be some work before the meeting and after the meeting, because you want to keep this thing moving forward. If you just have a routine meeting every month about the same topic, it's going to get slow and stagnant, and you won't see the change you need. We need much more rapid change every day. And so facilitating that before and after the formal discussion is just as important as the discussion itself.
Okay.
You know, another thing that you're going to hear a lot from staff, and we do, is about busyness. And, you know, you can't really address busyness. For nursing, busyness is a sacrament. So somehow or other, we're not going to really get away from busyness. We would be busy even if we weren't busy, just because that's a part of who we are. So the issue for the leader isn't really the issue of busyness, it's the issue of relevance. You know, one of the things we've got to be able to communicate to staff is it's okay to be busy, but let's make sure that we're busy about the right things. There's nothing worse than in nursing practice than rendering care and it being the wrong care just because it's a care you're committed to. Now the issue is our care is changing. Not caring isn't changing, our care is changing. And now our obligation as leaders is to make sure that the kind of care we provide is relevant to the time that we're in, so that we can help people who are busy doing care, making sure that they're busy doing the right kind of care in the right place at the right time.
Okay, great. As a person who teaches leadership for a living, one of the things I always try to do with my participants, customers, clients, is to leave them with some action items, one or two things that might be widely embraced, something useful, something helpful. So leave us with some tidbits, some things that we can take away from this and walk out of the room wherever they are watching this and take it and use it and start implementing some of these wonderful concepts that you're sharing.
Well, you know, there are some different tidbits now from the tidbits we might have shared in previous stages of leadership. You know, we're going through a change where we're writing the script as we live it. It's not a script we've all written before. It's not a place any of us have been before. So the issue for the leader is make those you lead aware of where you are in all this change. I have come to believe that vulnerability is a huge skill in the leader, being clear about what I am and what I'm not, what I know and what I don't know. A good technique for the leader is to gather their staff around the table, because, you know, we're always meeting monthly anyway to talk about what we're going to do next. Well, why don't we have a conversation about what we're not going to be doing anymore? That's just as reasonable a conversation to have as one around what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And at that table, why don't I, as a leader, number two, simply say, you know, I'm on this journey too. I'm with you on this journey. I am learning as we go. Now, I'm in a different role and a different position. If we don't know something, I can find out. If we don't have something, I can get it. I can be an agent of this process. If I find something out and I learn something, I will share that with you so that we're all, if you do the same thing, do that with me as well, so that we're all essentially on the same boat. And Jerry had mentioned earlier about this notion of engagement and empowerment. You know, if this is going to work, they're going to make it work. So the issue we have to realize is that they have full ownership of this, and that most of the work, most of the effort is in their hands. And so the more we can deliver that message, the more we can get out of the way and stop being the center of the table, but be the guide on the side of the table, the more we can actually empower them to do the work which is fundamentally theirs.
I recently had a lunch with some nurse managers, and we were talking about these very topics. And towards the end of it, one of the managers looked across the table and she said, "Tell me what the priorities are. Tell me where there's so much going on. There's so much change required. We have to do all these things that we're discussing for the good of the organization and our patients. Where do we begin?" And I said, "You know where to begin." I said, "What are we looking at? What's important to us right now?" She read off 4 different organizational priorities. I said, "You got it. So don't be distracted. Allow yourself to know that I am focused on the right things. The only challenge is then to connect what the staff are doing every day with where we're headed." And I think one of those tools is you must be an individual that reminds people about the foundational work you're about every day. If we think that these are things that sort of come from top down or come from external in, it's not going to be as successful. So if we stay focused on what we're trying to produce, and then we ask ourselves, can we do it better? Can we improve it? And listen to our patients and families. They tell us what's broken, what needs fixed. And rather than create examples of why that won't work, we really should challenge ourselves as, well, what might? A metaphor I've been using lately in leadership meetings is as a concept of a kaleidoscope. That you can look at something and you think you understand it and you know the way it looks, but if you just turn that dial just a little bit, the whole thing can change right in front of your eyes, and you may see something you've never seen before. And I think we're trying to open up that sense of creativity to allow our practitioners who do this work every day to know you can make some changes. Suggest what one you might want to try. How can I help you? Let's see if it works. If it fails, we applaud the failure. But back to failure, the one thing we don't want to do is create harm for our patients, our families, or our staff. So if that's what we can avoid, possibilities are endless.
And one of the definitions of success that especially comes out of complexity thinking is that success is the sufficient aggregation of appropriate error. If you don't have error, you have no measure of success. So the issue is the only error that's inappropriate is the one that's twice committed, because it tells you didn't learn from the first one, and the first one is a part of the normative experience. So embracing those. And for the leader, I think a part of that is that notion of clarity. Make sure that when you're asking for accountability or asking for performance, that it's relevant and that it's clear, so that people, as Jerry was suggesting, can break it down into priorities or undertaking that makes sense now, and we can, because change is one step at a time, so we can take care of those steps upon which subsequent steps depend, and that you're giving them chunks they can actually bite and succeed and build on for the next step.
Yeah. Every time I listen to you two, I learn things. I really do, and it just sticks with me. And I hope you folks out there watching this are just eating this up, because it's some really wonderful stuff. I love that leadership kaleidoscope metaphor. I just love that, because you're right, a small tweak, and it really kind of changes a lot of things. As we wrap this up, anything to inspire us that is still something you're dying to share with our audience before we close?
Well, for me, even though there's a lot of drama and trauma at this particular time of change, it's, in my career, as late in it as I am, it's a renewal, because how often in your career do you get a chance to actually write the script of your future and to be present while that script is being written, and to be a participant in that? And so my challenge and my hope for all of us is that we don't back off from it. We engage it. We enter into it. We move into the middle of it. And out of that noise comes creativity, and out of it will come the future of healthcare in whatever way is best for us. So my caution, or my frame of reference for all of us is let's be enthusiastic. And keep that enthusiasm, because we're going to need it to create what we're going to need to create. And it is a creative moment.
There's a concept we use quite often about the shadow of the leader. And there are days when I feel like I just really would rather not go in today, for the very reasons that Tim mentioned, that there's a lot going on. And our organizations are sometimes paralyzed by what they're trying to understand with health reform, the insurance exchanges, the new people that are coming on to the health roles. Now that people are supposed to be receiving care with health insurance, can they afford the co-pays they have? I mean, there's a lot that's trying to be discerned. In the midst of it, every day we care for people right in front of us. And I think part of what I need to do, and I hope that my team does, is you sort of have to get your game face on and get back in there and get at it, because no matter what we do and no matter how we feel, we have a population to serve. And if we do that, then we're sticking with why we went into this profession in the first place.
I think if we stay grounded, very much as Jerry said, care is really what brought me here. Care is what brought me to the table. Now, in 44 years in nursing, I've seen care change, but caring hasn't. And if we keep focused and centered on that, and I keep focused and centered on that, that's what brings meaning to the work, because bottom line, at the end of the day, it's still going to be, how did I demonstrate that I did the right thing and I cared enough to do what was appropriate for those we served?
Okay. Tim, Jerry, thank you so much for your information shared. Hopefully it was extremely helpful to you. If you want more of Tim and Jerry and others who can share some wonderful ideas of how you can apply this back in your workplace where it really matters to lead others, we have leadership immersions here at Ohio State through the American Nurses Association, so please check that out on the websites of ANA or Ohio State. Let me close by doing what I do at pretty much every workshop that I lead, or every event that I'm part of, and that is, don't be overwhelmed by all of this. It's easy to do. Pick one or two things that you've learned from today that really speak to you, and take those and try to start applying them. And the other thing I would suggest you do is bring someone else in on this, okay? A trusted mentor, a friend, a colleague, a coworker, and check in on you, all right? See how you're doing with your change, with your application of what you've learned today, okay? One or two things. Don't try to change 30, and you'll be forever spinning that kaleidoscope, and it'll never settle down, okay? So that's my challenge to you. I hope you've learned some things from this, and I know I have. I always do. So thank you.